Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us back after lunch. We appreciate the fact that many of you have decided to return and of course join us for this rigorous and engaging conversation that really looks to aim to source solutions for the opportunities in the energy sector that we are aware of in Namibia. So those of you who have joined us here live and in person, thank you again for your time. We're going to continue with the remainder of the panel discussions and sessions that we have. And we also made well aware that we've got a few of our viewers joining us on NBC1. So thank you so much for you joining us this afternoon to fully engage and understand how, as Namibians, you benefit from the opportunities that lie in the plethora of the energy space in Namibia. So we are going to shift gears now to build up on many of the conversations and themes that we've been discussing throughout the course of the last 2 days. We certainly know that throughout the course of this morning, we spoke around several aspects of the energy mix, not only understanding how renewables play a role, opportunities that continue to exist from an oil point of view. Later, we'll find out how this does differ significantly to mining, exploring opportunities onshore and offshore, but no opportunity for investment can be fulfilled without capital. And we're going to have a panel discussion now shortly that will help us unlock that capital and quite literally show us the money, looking at alternative ways and existing opportunities to finance the participation of Namibia within the energy sector. This conversation is a panel discussion. It will be moderated by the Chief Executive Officer for Commercial Banking at FNB in Namibia, Sepho Haibihambo. We'll also be joined by several panelists in the form of Mahevo Kadepa, who's a Senior Strategic Investment Analyst at the Development Bank of Namibia, Jonathan Ross, Head of Oil and Gas Coverage at RMB, Paulo Gomes, who is the Chairman of Orango Investment Corporation, Helen Aigbe-Brimmer, Director for Project and Asset-Based Finance at Afrixim Bank, and the Chief Executive and Founder of Moneda Invest will be joined by Ijeke Egbuago. So please join us as we welcome our panelists on stage to actively participate in this conversation.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So I am a banker, but for today, I'm going to take off my banker's hat and participate as a Namibian and ask all the hard questions on behalf of our local stakeholders. And on a light note, I'll just start that off with a quote from Bob Hope, who says, "A bank is a place that will lend you money if you can prove that you don't need it." So, hoping today that that myth will be dispelled and that our panelists will be able to paint a picture of how local players can get access to capital. So, in 3 minutes or less to all of my panelists, starting to my left with Maheva. What are your thoughts on financing Namibia's participation in the energy sector, and how do we do it? In 3 minutes or less.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. I think, as already mentioned, my name is Mahevo Kadepa, and I work for the Development Bank of Namibia. I'm responsible for the infrastructure sector, which covers also the utility sector. In there, we have the energy in there in the mix as well. So I'm not Jerome. I know your agenda says Jerome. Now, my thoughts on financing the energy sector. I think I would say that the environment, looking at, I think, 5 years ago, I think the energy sector has significantly matured to the level that the current focus is not so much just about generating power for the locals. It's also now, opportunities have also now arisen that what can we do to also focus on us actually exporting power to be it other African country, maybe through the Southern African Power Pool, or be it what can we actually do to add value to our current mineral resources to actually export that to, say, the likes of Europe. So I think I'm seeing a lot of I think maturity in that space, and I think one is the credit is also maybe given to our current policy. I think the policy, the ECB, I think is doing a great job when it comes to laws and policies. And I really think also with the hype of the green hydrogen, the oil and gas, you're seeing that the whole sector has really matured. Thank you.
Thank you. Ijeke, how do we finance local participation? First thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Very happy to be here. My name is Ejike, and I lead a team that works out of Nigeria. And I'm sure once I say Nigeria, everybody knows that we have a lot of experience in oil and gas. Now, what we're trying to do is to move the focus away from just E&P, and production and the natural resource into the value chain. At Monida, we believe that the key to actual wealth generation on the continent is actually the value chain, as opposed to the resource. And what we do is driving capital into the players in the value chain. So these are the guys that provide all the inputs for the entire production process. And we think that as a strategy, that is the sector or the segment of the oil and gas industry that African countries and governments must be most concerned about, and that's what we call local content. So when people introduce us as Monida, they call us local content financiers. Now, this looks like a very risky venture for most banks, and I understand that very well, having spent about 10 years in core banking in Nigeria, trying to do what I'm doing now. The issue is that the players in this industry, in this segment of the market, are the most unsophisticated, in the entire stack of the economy, of the industry. So how do you finance, from a very sophisticated traditional banking framework, how do you finance the people that look the least likely to repay? And that's the heart of the problem. Our solution at Monida, which we've tried to execute in Nigeria, and I think we've done fairly well, and we're trying to now scale into the southern part of Africa, is merging capital with technical capabilities and execution. If you're able to take away the performance risk, then it's possible for these unsophisticated borrowers, to be given access to credit, and then we'll see transformation in the market.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Johnny Ross, I head up our oil and gas team at RMB based in London. And I think I'll preface just a little bit. I think we're going to get into some of the challenges of financing local content in this discussion, but I wanted to preface a little bit on how a bank like ours sees it. And as you heard yesterday, RMB and FNB is a single bank. It's just the differentiation of the corporate versus the retail and commercial banking. So when I talk about us, it's FNB and RMB. For us as a bank, we're a very active player in oil and gas and have a deep knowledge of the sector in sub-Saharan Africa, and we've been doing that for a very long time. And we also have a very big presence here in Namibia. So the combination of those two things is why we've made such a big splash at this conference. It is in the floodlights of the growth opportunities for us, and I'm sure our competitors, the regional banks, are the same. And the main reason for that is the opportunity for our local business in Namibia, both at FNB and RMB. And that's really what's driving it. Although we provide all of the investment banking and services that we do offshore, it's really where it's going to make a difference for us is locally. So when we talk through the challenges, and there's going to be frustrations when with commercial banks not giving capital, just wanted to set that background that there is a huge vested interest for banks like us locally to make this work. And actually the local companies that are going to be the ones growing into the future banking them and servicing them is a massive growth opportunity. So there is a real willingness to address some of the challenges we're going to get into.
Thank you. Helen?
Thank you. I'll just start by talking a bit about Afreximbank. African Export-Import Bank is a 30-year-old institution. We're primarily a trade finance bank, but we recognize that in delivering on our charter, we also need to support trade-enabling infrastructure. Our balance sheet size is about $37 billion. We have about 52 of the 55 African countries as our member states. We've been actively supporting the energy sector across the continent for the last 30 years, and obviously are looking to partner more in depth with the opportunities that we find in Namibia. I think in answer to your, a direct answer to your question is, when I think of the magnitude of financing that is required to realize Namibia's resource-rich potential, I think that there's a need to put in place a long-term sustainable financing framework. And this is where Afreximbank can come in, partnering with the local financial institutions, or actually doing direct lending interventions. The good thing is that our single obligor limit is in excess of $1 billion, and we can do both short-term and long-term debt financing, and we can do tenors of up to 15 years, which is essentially what the sector needs and which is what the country needs. And I think over the next couple of minutes, we will go into more in-depth discussions where I can shed more light on some of the programs and the financing tools that we could deploy to support Namibia's economy.
Thank you. Paolo?
Yeah, I think I believe that in case of Namibia, it would be important to look at the different stages of your oil and gas activities. I think for the next few years, you're going to be essentially on the exploration before you start getting into development and then obviously the operation. So you need to create an ecosystem of financial institutions that will help you calibrate those phases for your necessities. And this requires, in many cases, almost acting as venture funding or venture debt. Because this story of having, asking for many of the small and medium enterprise to provide some resources to match some of the debt profiles that can be provided has been a challenge. And it has been an impediment of, in case of local content, for example. So I think it's important for Namibia to either to leverage some of the existing institutions, and I think we spoke about the Bank of Industry or what RMB is doing here, but I think there is space not only on leveraging existing institutions, but to set up dedicated institutions or to help create dedicated institutions to address some of the needs you will have. We need equity in many of our countries. You need equity. Where do you get that equity? You didn't have some sort of capital formation in this country, and it's not unique to Namibia. We have that problem in Africa. Many new nations in building the nation, where's the capital coming from? That's why some of the countries have used leveraging natural resources to get the debt, with the example of the relationship with Chinese. We know it's not the optimal thing to do, but we have a problem of capital, we have a problem of equity, and I strongly believe that you need to bring the insurance sector, the pension, to start designing dedicated institutions that will provide equity to many of your projects, even as kind of venture type of project. And there will be some mistakes to be made, I'm sure. There will be a risk of failure. But look, you are building a sector, but you're also building a nation. And you cannot just improvise the process of, local content will happen. It will not happen by magic. In some cases, you have to create the market. And creating the market requires having innovative institutions to do that. So we have examples of things that we have done in West Africa, and I think further during the conversation, we can give you concrete example of what we have done.
Okay. Good points raised, particularly with the perspective that in some instances we will fail. So I'm going to ask Jonathan, as a commercial bank and custodians of depositors' money, how do we approach dealing with the performance risk overhang that comes as a consideration for commercial banks when financing local content?
Sure. Well, I think we've got straight to probably the biggest challenge. The first thing to say is our bank and most of the other banks on the street have a long track record of supporting SMEs, and there's a range of products out there for working capital, trade finance, FX, etc., that can be accessed. But there are challenges when it comes to local content, and performance risk is probably the headline challenge, is particularly where you've got a company that is doing an activity that there's no demonstrable track record. It becomes difficult for a commercial bank to take a view on that. At the end of the day, we're senior lenders. We're not equity providers or mezzanine providers, and we're a commercial bank. We have shareholders, etc., to answer to, and regulators. That's the backdrop. I think what I heard yesterday from the minister was that when he sees a local content party, he wants that party to evidence how they're going to execute a particular activity efficiently. And that is absolutely aligned with what the bank wants to see. That's for us will be key to taking a view on an entity's ability to perform is having some evidence to back it up. And that's where the rubber meets the road. It's I guess there's a recognition that in Namibia, where there isn't a massive track record of oil and gas, there's going to be quite a lot of instances where parties are taking on activities that they don't have experience in, and that's probably where there is a bit of a gap. And I think in those situations there is a role for DFIs or central funds, or some of my colleagues on this panel actually to step in, and part of the job for us as commercial banks is even where it's not our balance sheet that's being used, and maybe we can't take that credit view. What we can do is access capital elsewhere. So we can work with the central bank to access credit guarantee schemes, or for instance, where you have a longer term project finance. In other sectors, we've accessed pension fund money to take a longer tenor financing. So we can, the commercial banks can play a role, not just financing themselves, but helping access those pools of capital to support the local content.
I think that's a great opportunity for us to segue and ask Beheva. The Development Bank of Namibia has a very unique role, given that it's got a development mandate for economic objectives, and also that mandate is specific to Namibia. So what is the unique role that you see the DBN playing in financing local participation, particularly in the energy sector?
Okay, I think before I answer your question, I think it's important for me to perhaps just give as to what DBN is, because we're not a commercial bank, so we are 100% owned by the Namibian government, and in accordance to the Act of Parliament. Now, with that, it puts us in such a unique position, because we are able to take on certain risk that the commercial banks might not necessarily be willing to take. Now, an example that I'm going to make is the fact that, for instance, when the renewable energy sector in Namibia started, DBN was actually the first to fund a solar project in Namibia. We were also the first to fund a wind project in Namibia. Only now, after we have funded and kind of de-risked the sector, that the commercial bank were able to come on board. And another example that I can make of is, for instance, the MSB, that is also again in the energy sector, where again DBN funded the first MSB project. And I think really that is one of the unique role that DBN can play. Now, the other thing also is that at DBN we have a project preparation funding. So I think there is an opportunity for us as a DFI to actually strengthen that project preparation funding, just so that we are able to prepare project to bankability, projects that are actually viable and that can actually attract the commercial banks and the likes. And then the other unique, I think, position that DBN has then is the relationships that we have with the local, with the regional DFIs. So we have a big brother, small brother relationship with the likes of Development Bank of Southern Africa, whereby if the transaction is too big for us and we are unable to carry it on our balance sheet, we are actually able to collaborate with the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and then we co-fund the project. We are also able to co-fund project with the commercial banks, because we are regarded as not their competitor, because we are a DFI. But I think Standard Bank would beg to differ on that. Then I think also the other role that we can also, or that we can play on, is also policy level, where we can actually, because we are affiliated to the government, we are also able to lobby with the government and also influence policies.
Helen, perhaps something you'd like to add from a regional DFI perspective on the role that DFIs play in financing local participation?
Yes, and I'm happy that I heard my colleague at DBN talk about project preparation. So one of the things that we observed, especially on the continent, is the lack of preparedness from a sponsor perspective, and the lack of preparedness for the project to be at a point where they can actually approach banks for financing. So in response to that, 4 years ago, we set up a project preparation department. And what it does is that it provides early stage funding to help develop a project. It's not a grant, it's a loan. And the idea is that the funds are paid back when the project actually reaches financial close. And we've actually taken it a step further. We collaborate with other like-minded DFIs who also have those type of departments, where we pool our funds together to make more monies available for the sponsors. And the good thing is that the funding could actually be used for training, all right? Because obviously Namibia is new to the world of energy, and when we talk about improving local content participation, there's a lot of training that needs to go in to develop the local skill set, not just to access funding, but to actually manage projects and to actually manage and deliver on projects, which is going to be critical for the sector. Last year, we launched an EPC contractor financing initiatives, and the idea is, and when I think about the earlier panel where the MD of NAMPORT stressed on the concept of beneficiation, when we talk about how much value is actually retained on the continent, when foreign EPC contractors come in and do the job, most of the value is taken out of the continent. So how can we improve local EPC contractor participation on the continent? So what we do is that we actually handhold these EPC contractors, not just from a financing perspective, but we actually give them the tools necessary to allow them bid competitively for some jobs. And we've done that successfully with a lot of top contractors in Egypt and also in West Africa. We've been able to mobilize over $2 billion worth of contracts. So those are some of the things that we would like to introduce to the Namibian economy. And we also offer a lot of risk mitigation instruments. And obviously this comes in to resonate with what you were saying about the fact that this is a new economy. There's a lot of risks that your conventional commercial banks will not be willing to take. And the fact that the local banking space is very small, right? So we provide several risk mitigation instruments. We can provide political risk insurance. We have schemes where we can provide financing to the local banks who can now on-lend to support local content since they have more knowledge of the sector. We also provide insurance guarantee schemes. We provide risk-sharing 50-50 mitigation schemes. And, just finally, when we talk about what the Namibian sector needs in terms of patient equity, we have an equity subsidiary, FEDA, and they actually specialize in supporting projects with early stage patient equity. They can do up to $50 million per project. So it's also something, it's also a tool that I know would go a long way to supporting the economy. There are lots of other products, and hopefully I will have some more time to talk about some of the intervention or more intervention schemes that Afreximbank could employ to support the Namibian economy. Thank you.
I'm hearing risk come up quite a lot. So assuming that there is a deal on the table, the cost of that capital tends to be quite high. And we have concessionary funding for a lot of green energy solutions. So curious, Paolo, to your mind, how do we go about lowering the cost of capital for traditional energy projects?
Well, the issue of the cost of capital goes back to what I was saying about the challenge we have in Africa of not having started the real process of capital formation. So you stay dependent of someone else's mood. We have seen it. We had the COVID, and then the European and the Americans start playing Xerox money. They didn't even consult us. But at the end of the day, they didn't even care whether the European, the Chinese, or the American, and they start just printing money to recover the economy. And then we couldn't do it. And then they flooded the market with so much liquidity, and we had to pay the price when they needed to tighten the monetary policy. On top of it, you have the issue of the rating, the way they rate African countries. Okay, are you rating Belgium as risky just because you have Bosnia in Europe, or you have Ukraine? Is there any space to do things differently in terms of the rating? Because there is a kind of a lazy spirit and lazy methodology on looking at risk of Africa, which means that we cannot control that, but I think it's time for African countries to start looking at how we're going to proceed to do the capital formation, even if we do it in a parallel track, in a very modest way. But we have to start. We have pension funds. We have insurance. By the way, here in Namibia, I think there's a space to develop further the whole system of insurance and the pension. And then you can go to the multilateral system to help you guarantee some of the risk you will take with your pension on the insurance. But the real financing of the economy has to be through your domestic company. That's why I think here, even if you don't have your local content completely drafted, I think Namibia can start helping upgrade local company with more access to finance, access to information, and upgrade their capabilities so they will be ready. Because the issue is now, on the oil and gas, we have to look at the need that those companies have. It's not just an issue of wish to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. These Chevron, Exxon, Total, Gulf, they have their needs. I think the country needs to look at what will be their need now on desperation, what will be their need on the development, what will be their need in our operation, and see what arsenal of tools the government can help to upgrade Namibian company, to prepare them in order to meet those needs. And this will require sometime doing some, I will say, entrepreneurial engineering by the state. I'm not saying for the state to replace the private sector or the banking system. I'm totally open market on that. But I think that it requires different type of innovative instrument that the state can put, including, for example, financing budget preparation, project preparation. You know, what of the major challenge in many African countries, and I think Namibia will be the same, is the money you need to prepare a very good bankable project that you could present to R&B. You know, and you don't find people who want to spend money on that. So that's a space in the process of creating market where the state can help. So you will be amazed by the number of bankable projects you could have, and then make it easier for RMB and less risky for him to come as a commercial bank, but you will have to compete with someone else. But again, I think on the local content, I will really encourage a process in which, even without finishing the process of the law, to start identifying companies in Namibia, encourage Namibians to create company, and then you start giving them access to information. You start upgrading them, training them. This is not capital, but it has the value of capital when this company will be ready to take the service, supply, finance, and other things with the Namibian companies.
I think Moneda has had some key successes with credit enhancements to de-risk some of these companies. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your experience in Nigeria and how you've gone about doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, the points that have been raised are very, very interesting, very exciting. First, on the project preparation from Afreximbank, you know, which is a critical tool in supporting local content. But then, in terms of capital formation, that's also something that we're very, very keen on working with partners to develop. We've just launched a fund, an actual local content fund, out of Mauritius, essentially targeting African capital, you know. So as opposed to going on the road to the regular stops, you know, in Europe, in the US, you know, we're essentially talking to African pension funds. You know, you go from country to country and you see a trend of up to 70% of pension funds being deployed in offshore assets, you know, and we're actively speaking against this trend by providing an alternative option, you know, where there are significant yields on the continent in local content transactions, which deliver excellent returns and also well risk mitigated. Now, in terms of what we've done out of Moneda, you know, it's important to explain that, you know, our strategies were organically created. You know, we didn't, you know, get some special formula on how to manage, you know, the risk, but it was essentially us trying to execute transactions without losing money, you know. And what we found was that, you know, by adding our own technical capabilities, and what that means is we had to create an in-house team, you know, with the capabilities that the local borrower doesn't have, you know, and merging capital deployment with technical support and execution, you know. And it definitely seems like a more difficult route to take, you know, because I wouldn't expect a commercial bank to create an entire technical team. I don't even think the regulators will approve, you know. But we found that we have unique circumstances in Africa, and we cannot expect traditional financial systems to work, you know, the way they work in Europe, you know, or in America. You know, it's perfectly fine, you know, to have bankable customers in Europe or in America, but here, you know, the bottom of the barrel, you know, have good opportunities, but they don't look like your customers, you know. And so it was important to create Moneda into a niche service provider that caters to the specific type of African customer, you know, that the senior lenders cannot, you know, accommodate. And it's a difficult process because, you know, you're talking to someone that you want to do the right thing, but he doesn't want to do that. You know, he might not be as exposed, he might not have the experience that is required, but he does have the opportunity in front of him. So what we've done is that we take an equity participation in their transactions, you know, and just to show the difference between this this stack of customer, and the customers that might come to Afreximbank, we're talking about, companies with 5 employees that have never executed a contract above 500,000 US dollars ever, don't have proper financial records, the MD might not be technically capable, but he has relationships that can get him a contract to supply pipes, Our function is to make sure that someone in that profile can be part of the oil and gas industry, and they're not below, the threshold. And just to add, we've seen these kind of strategies deployed before in Nigeria. A lot of commendation has gone to the Nigerian Local Content Board, led by Mr. Simbi Wabote. He spoke yesterday, and some of the strategies that they deployed, were also novel. They were specifically for the African environment. One of the funds that was set up was called the Community Finance Fund. And this is in small tranches of $100,000, $200,000. But those are the needs of those customers. And it also then, accepts the limitations of those customers. These are people that might not speak good English. These are people that might not have gone to the best schools. They may not have the best technical capabilities or team, but they are part of the industry. And there must be solutions that bring them into the ecosystem and allow them to then grow, into the point where they can then become, customers of RMB or Afreximbank. So that's the role that we're playing, and we're calling for a lot more collaboration. I'm sat here with, with leaders from institutions with, $30 billion and the likes of assets under management. And what we need, after 8 years of executing transactions of about $200 million, after 8 years, we're at the point where we need to scale, and we need the participation of senior lenders and larger partners that will add a senior debt, segment in our funding stack, and that will basically energize us to be able to, support more and more SMEs that they cannot support. So that's essentially the our relationship so far on the risk mitigation side. I think we're just at the point of scale. And I'm very excited about this fund that we're launching. We're just awaiting regulatory approval. We expect it to happen in May. Our offices will be in South Africa for now, and we're signing partnerships here in Namibia. We should have a local office here in Namibia before the end of the year, and encouraging local companies to be able to walk in and get the support that they need, however low their operations are. Our mandate is essentially to cater to those people in that stack below.
Jackie, I'm going to have to cut you off there so we can get some of the other panelists.
That's fine.
Jonathan, I'm hearing that there's instruments from the DFIs and from companies like Moneta that have higher risk appetite. And this capital is normally raised at a holdco level. To your mind, once this company has raised this debt, is there still capacity for these companies to come forward to raise working capital commercially?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's fairly standard that in a corporate funding you would have some flexibility for ordinary course working capital. So that's something that could be accommodated and is fairly normal. Those companies would just need to make sure that the covenants, etc., in their corporate funding would allow for that. But there's no issue with raising that at a different level. There'll be some constraints around it, but it's in the ordinary course of business, that's quite normal.
And Helen, is there anything you wanted to perhaps add on solutions that are unique to the Afreximbank?
Yes. So, our role goes beyond financing. We recognize the desire or the need for a complete ecosystem. So later on this year, we're going to be establishing an African energy bank because it's important to have African solutions to an African problem. So this is a partnership with the Association of Petroleum Producers. And the idea is for this energy bank to take leadership with funding the energy gap on the continent. And I think Namibia would strongly benefit from that. So hopefully that should take off before the end of the year. I see a strong need for collaboration, right, for this to be successful. We do a very good job with bringing in other financial institutions, so other DFIs like the AFC, the AFDB. We have a very active syndications desk, so we can use that to mobilize a lot more capital beyond what our balance sheets can offer. And, you know, when I talked about going beyond financing, over the last couple of years, we've started directly intervening in infrastructure development. So we actually build industrial parks. And you know, when I hear of the discoveries in Walvis Bay and Lüderitz, I think that they're a prime candidate for an industrial park. And this will also go a long way to support local content, because when you're a local content company, the last thing you want to be thinking about is the infrastructure that you need to deliver on whatever mandate that you've been given. So building industrial parks can allow the local content operators to come in and set up shop and fully operate in that. Another thing that we also have done is create special economic zones. And I think this will resonate strongly with Namibia, not just from an energy perspective, but even when you look at the mining sector. We're doing that successfully with the DRC and Zambia. For those who don't know, between the DRC and Zambia, they're probably the largest producers of copper, which is a key ingredient in the manufacturing of electric batteries. So we've created a special economic zone that straddles both countries, and it's a tax-free haven, and the idea is to encourage companies to come and actually set up manufacturing shop here. And I think, you know, when you talk about creating a full value system that actually benefits the Namibian economy, you don't want a situation where the oil is just exported and then the finished product is brought back for you to pay 10 times the price for it, which is what we're seeing happening across the continent. So the idea of encouraging companies to actually set up manufacturing companies that improve the process of the value chain. And again, not just from the energy sector, from also the very vibrant mining sector that is already happening in Namibia. So those are some of the additional interventions that we could deploy.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left, and what I'll do now is open the floor for questions. We'll take 2 questions. If you do have a question, kindly tell us your name, the institution you're representing, and then ask your question. Yeah. So, okay, we've got our 2 questions. Okay. I'll give you the 3rd question. There's a gentleman just behind you. Right, and I'll just ask that you get straight to the question and try not to have any commentary.
So my name is Javed Akhtar, and I'm from BW Energy. So this question is for Helen. So Helen, I wanted to know the bank, the African Bank. So what is the biggest dollar amount that financing you have done, debt financing that you have done?
Okay, so I mentioned in my opening remarks that our single obligor limit, which is the maximum amount we can give to one company, is $1 billion. Yes. That being said, so that being said, and I'm about to caveat that. So that being said, we have our sweet spot, and this is where I talked about collaboration. So our sweet spot is between $200 to $250 million. But if we do recognize that there's a financing gap, we can bring in our partners. There's the Africa Finance Corporation, you know, there's a Trade and Development Bank, and there are also other development banks in the Southern Africa. So we can bring all those resources together and help put together a robust, long-term, sustainable financing plan. In Namibia or in general? Oh, well, we just gave $1 billion to the Nigerian government.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful information. My name is Patrick Sam. I'm here on the behalf of the Association of Namibian Offshore Oil and Gas Service Providers. It's a long name. And my question is from a macroeconomic perspective. The association is very much aware in terms of the ecosystem that you're speaking about in financing infrastructure as well as skills and providing financing opportunities in terms of accessing market for them. How do we make those happen at the same time? How is it not like first infrastructure, like a linear process versus like how do financial institutions kind of cut up that need from Namibia in a macroeconomic situation where we need infrastructure, we need skills, and we need financing? What do we prioritize? What does that scheme look like from a financing perspective?
Is your question directed at any particular panelist?
Any particular panelist.
Okay, does anyone want to answer that question?
Sure, happy to. I mean, certainly banks like ourselves are pretty active in financing infrastructure projects throughout the continent. There's a pretty, sort of well-trodden path on project finance for such projects. It fundamentally based on the strength of underlying contracts, the parties involved going back to track record and all those sorts of things. But it's something that we're extremely active in doing, and most of the bank, I think Afrexim and other banks on the continent are involved in as well. So yeah, it's definitely. We see that as a big part of the growth opportunity is financing the infrastructure that goes along with all of the services and everything else that's going to be needed to deliver on this opportunity.
Please.
I'm a Marcio Mello. Fantastic. I really enjoy. And I love the bankers. Because they always give whatever you want when you don't need, but when you need, they don't give you anywhere. That's true, guys. You know that. But I want to come back to Namibia. I can get a lot of funds from abroad, but I would love to have funds from Africa. Why? Because I will pay the interest in Africa, okay? The question that my brother did is, your bank has funds to give me $1 billion? I can give you guarantee. And I want to tell you, what's the interest rate that in American dollars you can charge me?
Yeah, I think Paulo just kind of addressed that when we spoke about the cost of capital. Is there anything maybe you want to add to that, Paulo, just to re-emphasize on how we get the cost of capital down?
Yeah. Look, this is something that we don't control. And I hate to be sometimes spending energy on things that I don't control.
Yeah.
The US Federal Reserve, they will do the monetary policy that will serve the interest of the US. Now, as Africans and institutions in Africa, we have to focus, obviously, to have a proper macroeconomic policy, because we are not allowed to do whatever we want. But we have to develop the domestic financial market. There are some money in our countries, not enough to do a lot, because as I say, in terms of capital formation, but there are some money that exists in our countries. We have to use that. By the way, when you use local currency, then you are less exposed to the variation of the exchange rate. Secondly, I believe that in that process, if you use the state in an entrepreneurial spirit, the state can provide some guarantee to some very strong commercial bank. And the state, in many cases, have space to do that. Thirdly, we have to be very careful about some of the experience I'm seeing multiply where we go and get Eurobonds. It becomes something like a fashion. You see an African country doing well a little bit, and it goes for Eurobonds. That's trouble waiting for you. And I think we have to be, if you go for Eurobonds, it has to, the use of receipt, the use of that money has to go for things that will enable you to address structural problem you have. not to do fancy things, road, even if it's for infrastructure. So you have to be very careful. And I think finally, I believe that developing your financial market inside, because I was told that there is pension fund here in Namibia, I was told that the insurance, those are the type of capital you need, because at the end of the day, to develop and transform a nation, it's equity you need. Debt will be easy, but equity is more challenging. And that's what the state can do in terms of reassuring the owners of that equity money, that we will back you. Don't worry, go, we'll back you. But that's what's really transformed, I think, a country. I think that mindset, a culture, we need to infuse it in countries such as Namibia and others, because that's part of the solutions we need to really transform our countries.
So to summarize our discussion, there's different phases to the energy sector, and in the different phases, there'll be different funding requirements. And it ultimately requires an ecosystem. Sorry, we said we're taking 3 questions, and unfortunately we're out of time for this panel. So I have to wrap up, otherwise we'll be swept off the stage. So there's an ecosystem of financiers that needs to be drawn upon with playing different roles. We have credit enhancement companies, we have DFIs, and we have pension funds, and we have commercial banks, all playing different roles, with DFIs working to de-risk projects so that more players can come on board, with the presence of things like preparation funds, and then banks coming on board with project finance and direct balance sheet finance. And a big need for us to build competent local skills to be able to deliver reliable services into the energy sector. But ultimately, the role to develop financial markets in the continent and in Namibia is the role of local finance institutions to be able to, for companies to be better able to raise capital in local currencies. I thank you very much to each of my panelists for the participation, and thank you very much to the crowd for the questions. Apologies we couldn't get to your questions, sir. We are still here and happy to take your questions off stage. Thank you very much.
Stay for a good picture. Thank you very much to Seppo and her esteemed panel for really unpacking some interesting, innovative financing options relative to Namibians. Let's have an opportunity for a group picture really quickly. And let's give them another round of applause. Thank you for summarizing that so well, Seppo. Okay. Great. Is anyone? Yes, we have expert photographers in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to move into our last session for the day, having explored the various energy sectors, having looked at financing. We're now going to answer the question, oil is not mining and mining is not oil. And so how does one develop an oil industry in a mining company? Our moderator is Mr. Francisco Simão, who is the Legal and Corporate Affairs Director of Azul Energy. Thank you. And he has an impressive panel that will be joining him. The reason why I'm rushing everyone is because we have an initial presentation that is part of the panel. The panelists are Mr. Jay Park, King's Counsel, Managing Partner at Park Energy Law. Please give him a round of applause. Dr. Marcio Melo, who is the President of Brazil Petroleum Studies. Dr. Sindila Muiwa, who is the Technical Permitting Advisor, Risk-Based Solutions and International Resources Consultant. And finally, Mr. Willie Mertens, the Chief Executive Officer of Deb Marine Namibia. Thank you very much. I thank you for clearing the space just in front of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind continuing your conversations on the side. Mboye Shiri. Excuse me.
Great. It's a pleasure. Great. Thank you very much, everyone. I know it's the last panel, so if I can just ask anyone that's sitting at the back seats to just do a bit of exercise and move a little bit forward so that, we close some of these spaces that we have. Anyone who wants to come a little bit forward, please feel free to do so. So before we start, we won't be doing introductions. Afra has been kind enough to tell us, to tell you all our names. The first step that we'll do is we'll have Mr. J. Park do a presentation for us, and then we'll get into the discussion that oil is not mining and mining is not oil.
Thank you very much, Francisco. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. So I want to thank Selma and the entire Rich Africa team for inviting me to speak and to join such a distinguished panel. I was asked to give a little introductory presentation. Let me take about 10 minutes to do that. The topic being, oil is not mining and mining is not oil. And when I saw that as the topic, I was very excited. In fact, that's a great topic. But in fact, is that true? And it actually reads a bit like a resolution from a debate. And I was a debater in high school, and I thought, let's do a little debate today on the question of whether oil is not mining and mining is not oil. Okay? Therefore, here we are. Resolve that. Oil is not mining and mining is not oil. Now, before this event, we flipped a coin, and the advocate for the negative is going to go first for 3 minutes, primary case. Then the advocate for the affirmative is going to go next with the primary case for the affirmative. 30 seconds for rebuttal and conclusion from the negative, 30 seconds for rebuttal and conclusion from the affirmative, and then the judges make their finding. And you are going to be the judges. So think about this as we go through the arguments. I'm going to speak for both the affirmative and the negative, but when I speak for the negative, I'm going to stand over here. And when I speak for the negative, for the affirmative, I'm going to stand over there. So here we go. Let's get started. You have 3 minutes. Okay? When we talk about mining and oil and gas, the truth is we're actually talking about the same functional activity. We're extracting resources from below the ground to create value above the ground. And look around us today. That's where most of the wealth in the world comes from. As we take things out of the ground, we bring them above the ground, and we have roads, schools, hospitals, and the life that we lead today. Therefore, the common objective of oil and gas and mining is the same thing. We're mining oil and gas. And the skills we need to do that are functionally the same. We need geologists to assess where are these resources, and we need engineers to, having found them, figure out how do we get them out. Okay? There's really no difference between those functions. It's a common process as well. We explore, we appraise, we declare commercial and develop the project, then we produce it, and then we abandon and reclaim it. Okay? Both types of activities are the same functional activity. And what states and investors are looking for in these regimes are the same thing. If you are an investor, you're going, I want to know I've got the right to monetize the discovery that I make. I want to know that the regime I'm investing in is stable, and I want to know that the regime I'm investing in is enforceable. And that's what I call the investor's 3 pillars. Okay? Then, if you are a state, you're going, well, okay, we can make all those arrangements, but it's important that there be a fair revenue share to the state, that there be prompt exploration activity, that the environment be adequately and safely cared for, that local content and local benefits will be gained from these activities beyond the revenue share, and that there's some reasonable level of activity controls. I call these the state's 5 standards. Mining, oil and gas, same thing. And then the other thing we find is very common challenges. In order to commercialize a project and get some revenue, you have a long exploration time with high risk, high cost, and no rewards. Then you have a development period in the success case for your exploration, a development period with high risk, high cost, and no rewards until development's finished. And finally, in the production case, you've got some revenue, thank God, and it may be a very significant amount of revenue, but it's still into a very volatile price environment for commodities that may or may not make your activity profitable in light of the kind of taxation regimes that apply. These are common across mining and oil and gas. And also we then have common issues of the problem of the obsolescing bargain and the resource curse. The problem of the obsolescing bargain is this. This chart shows you the expenditure profile and the revenue profile for a mining or oil and gas project. And as you can see, early in the life of the project, you have a lot of cost and no revenue. In the development phase, even more costs and no revenue. And then during the production phase, lots of revenue, modest costs, okay? Which then tick up at the end during when you abandon and reclaim. So what happens is at the beginning of the life of the project, the state is saying, we need investors, please come. We want your money, we want your expertise, we want your technology, we want your personnel. But then once you hit the production phase, the situation changes. Ooh, that's a very nice resource you've got there in our country. Right? And this is when the bargain made at the beginning was obsolete. And that's the reason why those 3 pillars for investors are important. And then the other issue we see that's common is what's called the resource curse. The paradox of plenty, it's sometimes called, in which states that have lots of resources, for some reason, around the world, tend not to be the wealthy states. And it doesn't seem to make sense that this should be the case. That's why we call it a paradox. And we see a bunch of reasons why this exists. The Dutch disease, revenue volatility, conflict, corruption, all create the kinds of problems of a rentier estate. Okay? So these are the issues that I think are common, and I think they define the fact that these are basically the same kind of industry, mining and oil and gas. Therefore, you're now going to hear from the argument for the affirmative. He's probably going to tell you that there's differences, but look, they don't matter. Okay? Listen to me and find for the negative. Okay, 3 minutes is up. Time for the affirmative to speak. The affirmative to speak. So on behalf of the affirmative, let me say this. The oil industry is different from the mining industry in many ways. We're developing energy resources. We're dealing with fluids and not rocks. And when we deal with fluids, how we go about finding them is very different. We need to find a source. We need to find generation of the resource. We need to hope that there's a reservoir with a cap and a seal and migration to that reservoir. That kind of activity is different than mining, which generally relates to hard rock matters. Okay? And that means we use different skills in terms of gathering data and analyzing that data. It means we have different regimes. Almost every state has a mining law that's different than its petroleum law. And that's important because there's differences in how we regulate, how we award the rights, and how we carry on the business that make it necessary to have separate laws. Namibia does, for example. And then finally, there's different investors. We need mining companies that do the mining work for hard rock minerals and precious stones, and then there's oil companies who explore for oil and gas. There's no company that does both, okay? The only example I used to be able to give about that was BHP Billiton, and of course, they then sold their oil and gas side to Woodside, one of our sponsors. So you need to have different industries, you need to address those industries differently. Therefore, it's clear that affirmative is the winning side of this debate, and you as judges should find for the affirmative. I rest my case on behalf of the affirmative. Okay, 30 seconds now for rebuttal and conclusion for the negative. That idiot who is just talking to you for the affirmative, he doesn't know anything. Just like I told you, he said there's difference. Those differences don't have a distinction that's worth making. And he then said that oil and gas is energy. Oh, really? Have you ever heard of coal? Have you ever heard of uranium and nuclear? That's energy too. So don't believe the guy that just told you you should fine for the affirmative. Instead, you should fine for the negative. And in fact, I'm going to yield over 10 seconds of my rebuttal just to give the affirmative guy a chance to try and make a case that's pointless anyway. Okay, I'm now going to speak for the affirmative and its final conclusion. Let me first begin by saying I'm not going to respond to the ad hominem attack that's been made by the gentleman advocating for the negative, except to note that obviously he doesn't have any logical arguments to make, and he has to resort on personal attacks. The mining industry, I accept the point about energy, okay? Yes, coal is energy, nuclear is energy, but my point was more about fluids versus solids. And yes, there's some aspects of mining that are fluids. There's helium, found in connection with oil and gas activity. There's white hydrogen, that according to the Financial Times, 5 trillion tons of it around the world as white hydrogen. Okay? We're busy trying to make green hydrogen, including here in Namibia, but the white hydrogen is wholly unexploited. And I don't know why that is, but I can tell you here in Namibia, there's no license for it. So helium's being found, there's no license to govern it. And so the mining industry, they don't get gases, they don't get fluids, and we should recognize that's the area where the oil and gas industry stands separate and apart, and you should find for the affirmative. There completes our debate. And now it's up to you as judges. Resolve that oil is not mining and mining is not oil. Judges, do you find for the negative? Put up your hand if you think the negative made the best arguments there. Put it up. I want to see any people who put that up. Okay, good. We've got a few hands up here. Interesting. Now, how about for the affirmative? Put up your hand if you think the affirmative, that statement is true. Put up your hand if you think that. Okay? Let's see. Okay, we have far more hands for the affirmative. I declare the affirmative the winner of this debate. And thank you for that. And frankly, I thought that was the outcome as well. Indeed. Good. Thank you. I'll admit that maybe at a petroleum conference we might have a biased audience. If we did the same survey at a mining conference, maybe not the same outcome. Which then leads us to the second half of our topic, which is how to develop an oil industry in a mining country. This is for the panel to discuss. I have a couple comments drawing from the debate that we just had. I talked about the process of oil and gas discovery, of explore, appraise, develop, produce, and reclaim. For mining in Namibia, you've done all of that. You've seen the full cycle. For oil, you have not. You're all still at the exploration phase with some positive-looking discoveries that have yet to be fully appraised and have yet to get to development. Okay? And that's going to be one of the areas that we're going to need to focus on in Namibia, is those big steps to go to commerciality. And that involves many government decisions. Here you will see on this slide all the steps of that right to monetize that I talked about. You explore, you appraise, you declare commercial, you develop, you produce, you gather, you process, you transport, you export. Every one of those verbs I've just described is another opportunity for the government to step in, give their approval, or not. And so this right to monetize is an important thing. It's worked in the mining industry, and that bodes well for the oil industry. Okay? But this is also where the problem of the obsolescing bargain often rears its head, is will there be monetization of the oil industry? That's the open question. And that's going to take a lot of regulatory work that's never been done in this country for the oil industry. Let's hope that Namibia's experience with the mining industry leads them to be able to do it as well for oil as they have for mining. There's also issues, in my view, of regulatory challenges involving in multiple licenses and multiple ministries that you need to get activity underway. I was a former executive officer and chairman of Recon Africa that drilled the first onshore exploration wells in this country in more than 50 years. It was an immense number of licenses needed, different ministries, different approvals. Dr. Sindilla helped us in all of that. And that was a lot of work. And I've worked in 50 countries, and I can tell you there's a lot of places that have a better single window regulator that deals with all of these things together. Now, we did see lots of coordination among ministries, ultimately, but that's an area where I think enhancements can occur. And then finally, I'm going to say there's a variety of petroleum resources out there, each one a bit different. And my example for this is a cow. Here's a cow. Here's all the different cuts of beef you get from a cow. You get tenderloin, sirloin. That's the best part. That's the steak. But there's also the chuck, the rib, the brisket, and the shank. We eat the whole cow, but we use different recipes in order to do so. The chuck, we grind it up in a hamburger and serve it at McDonald's. Okay? The brisket, we cook it low and slow in a barbecue. We need to have different recipes to make the whole cow edible. You wouldn't want to try and eat a piece of chuck like it was a steak. Okay? Well, here's the petroleum cow. And there's light oil and sweet gas. That's the steak of our petroleum cow. But there's also deep water, oil sands, coal bed methane, all these other parts. And they require different recipes of fiscal, tenure, and environmental in order to exploit them all. I come from Alberta, Canada. We have 5 different petroleum regimes in Alberta, Canada. Light oil, sweet gas, heavy oil, oil sands, and coal bed methane. Okay? Each of them regulated in a different way. Namibia and many other states don't do that. It's all, you sell the whole cow at one price. Okay? And one set of rules. And what I think you're going to discover as we move to commercialization is those rules may not work for every cut of beef in the Namibian petroleum cow. So, those are my comments. I want to suggest that Namibia lean into the commonalities of mining and oil. You know mining, therefore that knowledge bodes well for the future of oil industry. Let's turn the possibilities into prosperity. As is done for industry, we can go far and go fast together, which is our theme of this conference today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jay, for that. And I voted for negative, so I wasn't so easily convinced. So I'm going to ask the panel to keep the discussion going in order to convince me to go from the negative into the affirmative. I'll start with Willie, and I'll work my way up, because there's a lot of experience on the panel. And I'll start with Willie, who's at Debmar in Namibia. If the process of diamond extraction is that significantly different. If you can take us through that process of extracting diamond from the seabed and some timing at a very high level.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Francisco. I'm sort of going for the affirmative, because mining and oil is essentially, you know, we are looking at the stuff that people need. And what we do is we go look for the stuff, we see if it's beneficial to get it out of the out of the ground, whether it's under sea or on land. We may have slightly different processes. What we are looking for may be slightly different. Some stuff may be hard, some may be liquid. And then we sell it almost to the highest bidder. But when it comes to mining, in terms of the regulations, there are obviously different regulations. And what we have in Namibia is that, at least for us, it sits under the same ministry. And where oil can come in is to help us to diversify the economy. In that the mining industry has been the mainstay for years of the Namibian economy, whether it's job creation or contribution to the fiscus. And where my sort of experience comes from is more on the marine side, and we call it marine diamond recovery. We a Namibian company. We are a joint venture, and these are all of the things that oil can sort of take a leaf out and just build on. When we started out, we had 10% or 14% non-Namibian employees. Within about 9 years, we got to 90% employees being Namibian. So that was a concerted effort to make sure that the Namibians are part of that employee workforce. And at the same time, we shouldn't look at oil as a competitor for mining. We should actually look for opportunities to work together to take the country forward. Maybe I'll stop there for now.
Great.
Come on, guys.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I want to continue on my still negative, so I'm going to go to Sindela to see if he helps me out. Sindela, tell me a little bit about the seismic acquisition process for a mining project, let's say, that you would have carried out if you're DFI in Namibia versus an oil and gas seismic project, and the similarities or differences that you'd find in those, seeing as you have experience coming through doing a lot of EIAs and related work for mining companies and more recently for oil and gas companies.
Thanks so much. Good afternoon. It is a very interesting question that I've been posed with, but let me try to dissect in a much more simpler way that the seismic that has been mentioned are slightly different. So let's take up with the mining, which I know in the marine environment we call it recovery, but I think that's the right term to use instead of saying mining or recovery. We do exploration. Once you discover a resource, you recover it. So on the onshore mining operations, what we normally start with, for some of us that are familiar with the process of application, is that an individual will develop a theoretical model. That theoretical model is transformed into a license, which is an EPL in Namibia, and that's managed under the Minerals Act of 1992. In there, you get an exclusive prospecting license, and that will outline your exploration program that you are going to implement. And in the mining industry, when you are operating onshore, that means on land, one of the initial steps that you start with is the simple desktop mapping, where you collect an existing data, and once you build a theoretical model in terms of the general targets that you have, and if that particular geological system seems to be sitting very far deep, then you would apply some of the geophysical techniques that are there, and seismic may be one of them. But there are also other applications that may be used, like electromagnetic survey. If you are looking for uranium or any other commodity, as you know, Namibia is mining not only diamond recovery. We have uranium as some of the commodities that are being produced, as well as gold. So for uranium, you'll be actually using radiometric, which is another type of geophysical method, similar or within the same group of applications that are used, or tools that are used to search for commodity. For offshore, if you go in the marine environment, like for example, what DFI Marine is doing, they would use a different type of seismic survey. These are low energy sonar type of energy, so you're trying to map shallow targets. In this case, they are looking for alluvial gravels that are very shallow and that can be easily recovered, stripped, and recover the diamonds that may be held in that particular area. When you go in the oil and gas, for onshore systems, you are looking for a structure that is very, very deep. For example, for some of the support that we have provided onshore at the moment, the structure targets are in the magnitude of 2.5 to 8 kilometers. So the type of survey that you do there in terms of seismic survey is actually a two-dimensional, which is the original mapping tool. Once you have identified a specific target, then you can do what you call a three-dimensional survey. And the three-dimensional survey will then delineate a specific location, which you can then come with a rig and start the drilling operation in order to test whether that particular target indeed has what you think it has. For offshore environment, it gets very difficult. Well, for onshore, you use, actually, in most cases, there are different types of equipment that have been used in order to do the seismic survey. Some of them are vibrosity, for example, which is a much more versatile tool because it has got a broadband velocity band. That means you can choose different velocities. And if you're working in a very sensitive environment, you can be able to control which band to use, not for it not to interfere with the other, for example, frequencies that might be important. Say, for example, if there are wildlife there, wildlife frequencies will be very clear. You know that these are low frequencies, and if you want to operate in that particular area, then the vibrosities will be actually tuned to a much more different frequency. Yeah. Other tools that have been used in this case is the weight drop. For example, in the northern part of Namibia, that the Explorer was used to do seismic survey. That was a two-dimensional survey. So it's like you use a MOB. It's a vehicle with four-wheel capability. When you go in the marine environment for oil and gas, you use a vessel. In this case, it's a big ship that will have about 9 kilometers of towed ears that will be floating on more or less on top of the surface of the water. And then some kind of source will be generated, in this case generated by a sound. That sound will travel through the water straight into the ground, and travels kilometers into the ground. As it does so, it maps the relevant targets that the oil company is looking for. Once that specific target has been delineated, then a drilling platform is brought in position in order to test to see whether that particular location contains oil or gas or not. And that's what has been happening all along since the first well that we supported in 2008, that was Sintes Naftagaz, and we supported all the other various wells that were drilled in Namibia up to the current discovery that we are. We have been operating and providing permitting support to all the companies.
Great.
And I'm pretty sure that they can all coexist. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So you've done a good job of not just going the difference from mining to oil and gas.
Thank you.
And onshore and offshore. And this is
Do
where I
not
bring
worry.
in Marcio.
Do not
because,
worry.
No. You're next. You're next. I'm picking on you now.
Okay, me
I'm
now?
picking on you right now because I want to know your experience in Brazil.
Can I go?
No, you're going to be able to talk and flex all stage because I want to know from your experience in Brazil.
But I want to talk. The guy called me to sit here, and this sun, I am here suffering. Where is the liberty of speech in Namibia?
Let me now ask you, Marcio, Brazil has both a mining sector and a petroleum sector, has onshore, has offshore. From a regulatory perspective, what do you see as similar? What do you see as different? Because Namibia currently is still at an early stage, and Brazil is at much development stage.
Many thanks. This is a clever guy. It's a clever question. I go there because it's too hot. Mr. J or Dr. J, brilliant. He must be a professor because you simplify, which is very complex. You agree with me? But I disagree with him. No, but this is healthy. Probably he's right because he has much more knowledge. But I will say why I disagree. And I start, if my friend allowed, and my good friend that I'm very honored to meet you again, is that Namibia is not doing the right in mining. It's doing it completely wrong. Why? You have to give jobs. You discover a mine, you have to do all the processing here. You have to do the industrialization here. Then you give jobs. They got to get that stuff and throw away and sell a ton for $1. I have been in both. God make my destiny change in 1 week. I got my degree in hard rock mining. And my dream was in the Amazon jungle, uranium, gold, copper. But my father came to me and said, my son, you have to go to Petrobras because he's helped to found Petrobras. They say, but fluids, father. And I went 48 hours in fluids, and petroleum is not only fluids. Look at the shale oil, it's rocks. Great guy, helium, hydrogen. I have done everything. Potassium salt in the Amazon, you know how we extract? And was almost mine. I put a bid, but the government take the bid. One day Petrobras come to me and say, Marcio, I want you, because I was in the research center, I was the boss, to sort it out the Petromisa, you know him, the mineral company from Petrobras. I organize everything. Then what you have to do, gentlemen, is the same. It's hunter. You have to be a hunter. It's a risk. The procedures are the same. If I have a power, the terms will be the same. But all the beneficial, you have to find the mining. Namibia is one of the largest mineral provinces in the planet, like Brazil, and you know. But we processed everything there. You have to put a law. Let's to process here. I am wrong? I do like Jay. Put the hands who agree with me. I beat you, huh?
The debate is good. And we're going to keep this debate going. So, given the similarities between the two, oil and gas and mining, I'll then turn and ask each of you, should then the skill sets also be transferable and the number of employees that are available in mining be equally available to oil and gas? Or is there additional capacity building that's still required on top of what's already existing? And I'll start with the professor. I'll go to the company, I'll go to HSC, and I'll come back to...
I do see a lot of common education. You go to university and learn about geology. They teach you about all kinds of rocks, and there's not just petroleum geology that you study. But this world gets more specialist all the time, okay? And petroleum geology, petroleum petrophysics, all these things, they get more, and there's more and more knowledge, and in order to have enough of that knowledge at the extreme ends of where we're learning, you need to become a specialist. And that's what we see is that not far into your university training or after university, you end up working for either a mining company or an oil company, and then you build more and more specialist expertise. And that's what I see happening, and I think that's to be encouraged because we're doing this job better than when we had less knowledge.
Fantastic. So I'll throw the...
Come on, guys. Yeah. I'm a brilliant guy, and come on.
So,
if you don't applaud, I leave.
So I then ask Willie, are you worried that you're going to lose some of the mining skill sets to the oil and gas sector? Some of your geologists or mechanical engineers?
Not really. I mean, a lot of people, maybe in the short term, a lot of people have been asking, you know, you're going to lose a lot of skills. People will be, you know, we've got navigation officers, engineers, geologists. They will be leaving your company. Yes, in the short term. But I think this is an opportunity for us, not to just look at each other as an entity or as an industry, but to work together. You know, we don't then have to send our people out to be trained somewhere else. Let's build institutions here that can service us. So I see this as an opportunity where we can work together, where we can find scale, because at this point in time we don't have the scale to for these skills development. We always have to go outside, and people are asking us, why are you sending a bulk of your people outside? So let's use this opportunity to collaborate, find the areas where we have the needs for, and instead of circulating the same people, let's get more people into the pool, and we can draw from that.
Cindy, I will not ask you the same question because it will be too easy, so I'll vary it a little bit. As someone who has done EIAs, once again, for mining companies and petroleum companies, what made it possible? How were your skill sets transferable for the different types of EIAs?
Well, Francis, thanks very much. I think the foundation, the whole petroleum and mining sectors, they all come from more or less the same core. In this case, it's all applied geology. But there are a number of specializations that is actually there. So from my side, I actually had an applied geology course. That's what I did, engineering, geology, and geotechnics. So it's a very broad-based type of operation. And through the various other degrees that I did, in this case, my MSc, I moved more into engineering, environmental engineering. But the PhD is more building up a knowledge-based system. In other words, developing something that was similar to what today we call artificial intelligence, which is for non-expert. And with that kind of power, then I was able to be able to understand what kind of knowledge is required, for example, to run a permitting system for a mining industry. At the same time, look at the petroleum industry, and getting the technical base of understanding exactly what is there. In this case, the geology, the applied geology, the engineering, and just bring in the specialization that we required in order to build a risk-based solution. And that's why we were able to provide this type of very highly specialized technical support for the last 20 years, both mining and petroleum companies.
Come on.
And now to good, stand up, it's very hard. And now for you.
I have to be here.
Yeah. No?
Guys, I like what Jay said, what this guy said, and what guy said, but I disagree. No, I'm joking, I agree. We are in the year of artificial intelligence, machine learning. Very soon it's coming robots if we are not smart enough. No company will give a job for a guy that left university. In one time in my life, I have 12,000 employees. Do you agree? 12,000. Each one has a task, like a car. You have tires, you have this stuff. What do we have to do in Namibia? We have to do a basic course in geology. The guy has to be a geologist. Like he said, in geology, he studied hard rock, stratigraphy, sedimentology, geochemistry, that's a fluid, gas, then give a strong background. I know that you agree with me. He's from my church. Give the basic, and then 1 year in specialization. Master degree, 1 year practical. If the guy wants to be a mining, he's do a practical study like the doctors in mining. And then allowing the government oblige the mining companies to take a guy, a trainee, because you only learn in doing. And then specialization. I have 2 masters and 100 PhDs. Because you have to study. It's like the doctor. Remember when you have the general doctor? You get there, the guy looks to you and say, oh, you have a bellyache. Today, you need specialization in what we have to do. Because these guys that we give the specialization will boost this country, and you have jobs. People will hire jobs. You don't need to bring a guy from the States, a guy from Brazil. Although you don't, I will come. It's what we have to do. I answer your question.
You did, and you answered it without me asking it, which is perfect.
Yes.
So I'm taking it back to Jay. So Jay, Namibia has some discoveries already. Drilling still going on. There's still some more prospectivity to be done. Give us a rough idea in terms of timing from discovery to production and the different challenges that may be faced as you go through that journey.
Well, the time from discovery to production in new states where petroleum has not previously been developed tends to take much longer than in developed states where there's already some infrastructure in place. You find an additional incremental field. It's more economic because there's already infrastructure. So we're talking a lot of jurisdictions where it's a 10-year timeline between exploration, appraisal, development, and production. Okay? Sometimes 10 years if you're lucky. Whereas if you're going to want to go and drill a well in Texas, you drill a well and you're tied in and you're producing in 3 months. And that has a vast impact on the economics of that activity. It doesn't take as much of a find to make that commercial compared to what you need to find in Namibia and similar exploration jurisdictions. And it's trying to find ways to shorten that time that we really need to work on. And that's why I talk about things like single window regulation and trying to make all these things happen in as quick a pace as we possibly can.
Fantastic. I will then go to Willie. I'll go to Willie with a similar question, but for the mining in offshore for diamond, what's the usual time frame that you take from the moment you know there are there's diamond present in a location to production or extraction, as you indicated, or recovery?
Recovery, yes. Look, it's a bit difficult to answer that just straight on because you need to look at whether you have the grades in place and then whether you have the tools in place to recover that specific grade. But if I can just take you back to a recent vessel that we acquired, That was in 2022 when that vessel came onto production. But we've been busy with that probably for 10 years because we needed to firm up the resource. But before we could firm up the resource, we needed the equipment. And we needed a different vessel, which was a sampling vessel that we started building in around the 2011, or started thinking about building in 2011. That vessel was inaugurated in 2016 at a cost of Namibia dollars 2.3 billion. But that vessel did not generate any direct revenue. We then started the feasibility studies for the recovery vessel. That took us another 7 odd years after that, which we put into the water in 2022. So apart from time, it's capital intensive. It needs a lot of money. You're talking about 10 billion Namibia dollars for something that you don't actually know 100% whether you will get it. So that's a lot of faith that you have to put in the work that is done by the geologist in terms of telling you that is there. At the same time, you need the financiers to help you with that funding along the way. So even if you find something that's viable, you still need a backer. And I'm glad to say that in Namibia we could find financiers, including RMB, who is a sponsor of this event, who helped us getting that to fruition. So it's time, it's capital, and it's patience that is required.
Great. Sindela, once again, I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, which is, rather than focusing from discovery to production, is on the path to a discovery of whether it's diamond present or hydrocarbon presence, what are the types of waste that are generated, and what are the type of considerations you need to have during that process? No, Sindela, yeah. You have, I've got another one for you.
Thanks so much for that. When you are dealing with mining operations, for example, again, we have to separate the onshore and offshore operation, the on-land and marine-related mining operations, and that also depends on the type of commodity that you are dealing with. If you are just mining some base metal, for example, on land, similar to what, for example, and then that also depends whether that particular mine is an open pit mine, similar to what you see in Roshpina. Roshpina is actually a shaft, an underground mine, but what you see in Rossing and Langehanrich mine, these are uranium mines. The type of waste that you generate there, a lot of it is actually tailings. That's the waste that comes from the actual processing. So you mine your rock. That rock goes through the primary crushing, and then the secondary crushing, and then the milling. From the milling, that's why you add your chemicals in order to separate your targeted metal from that particular rock, and then the remaining waste is the one that goes on what you call the tailing stump. So for all onshore operation, you would find this mountain of material, and for some of you that are from Namibia driving towards the north, before you get to Otavi, to your right, you have B2 Gold, and you can see the new mountain there that have been created. That's tailing, that's waste. So it's solid waste. Yes, it has its own environmental issues. In this case, we are looking at visual impact that you have to see. But if that is designed properly in order to mimic the surrounding environment, that's the reason why an impact assessment needs to be done in order to make sure that the final reclamation and rehabilitation of that particular entity fits within the landscape. For offshore environment, it's a different story, because what happened there is they are mining diamond. In this case, it's only diamond that we are mining currently in Namibia, what is being recovered. So when you recover the sediment, the undersize and the oversize is actually taken back into the sea. The diamond-bearing material that you think is of high quality is then passed through the various stages of recovery until you get the final X-ray recovery stage, where that particular resource is then bottled and ready to be taken out of the area. So the waste mainly that comes from there is mainly the generation that is, say for example, domestic waste. The waste from the vessels that are used for both exploration and recovery process. That waste is usually segregated, stored on board the vessel, and in most cases is brought onshore, in this case in Lures. That's what Deb Marine Namibia are actually doing. And then on onshore, it's again sorted. The standard waste, which is like standard municipal waste, goes to the landfill site that is in Lures. and then the hazardous material is then brought to a hazardous landfill site. In this case, can be Windhoek or Walfish Bay, or it can be utilized, reused, or recovered. It's a similar mechanism is applied. For oil and gas, it's a different story. When you are offshore environment, again, it's similar to there's a similarity in terms of the type of waste you generate, but the cuttings, as you create your hole, the cuttings that are being removed, normally they just left on the seafloor, and this is not a very big amount. It's an amount that's just very, very limited. Usually with current, that starts to spread away, and during the demob, there is always a survey that is actually done to make sure that the seafloor is actually left in a very good condition and safe. But any other material that is generated from the vessel itself is taken again offshore to make sure that it's managed properly and sorted, and then some of it is used for recycling. So the system is more or less the same for the offshore or marine environment minerals recovery, and in this case, petroleum exploration and production. And for onshore, it's slightly different because you have got a big volume of material when it comes to the mining industry. But for petroleum exploration, for onshore, it's much, much more less amount of material that is generated because it's just a footprint of maximum 3 hectares where you have your oil operations, and the actual pad, the rig, only have a small little footprint with your waste that has been produced, actually left on site. And usually when you do the rehab, that particular site is integrated within the land use of that particular area and very easily incorporated within the community. And that's what we have been doing with some of the projects we have been supported recently. Very, very successful, and it's something that can exist much, much better compared to the mining industry. Thank you very much.
Great. You're going to listen to the question carefully, because I'm going to ask you to take us into dreamland.
I will do that.
You take us into dreamland.
I know what you are going to ask me. I know. First, I find a guy that talks more than me. This guy's tough. But they are right. But they are right to be a conservative people. They are not hungry. 10 years if I'm in Namibia? Never. The largest reserve in the South Atlantic, as you know. I'm waiting 10 years to go to the supermarket to spend my money? No way. This is why my dear Veronica there, that came here late in my talk. Yesterday I told her, Namibia has to put an oil company. I came here in 1 year and a half. I did 5,000 square kilometers of 3D, drilled 3 wells, each well in 50 days, in water depth, over 1,500 meters, did you know that? One well, 5,300 meters down. If I have discovered, I will produce in 1 year. I am a liar? No, I am a liar? Well, as my brother, Jay, now I can call him my brother, because to be here after 5 o'clock, he's a hero. And you are a hero. Thank you very much. And applaud yourselves. Come on. What you do, what Petrobras do, because we are hungry. You do an alternative system that you have the well there, you put a tanker, and in Meadowfield, you put just a flexible pipeline, and we started to produce when I built a FPSO. But why? Shell, Exxon, Total, I love them. Love them. But they have other projects. How much a deep water well with 10 billion barrels in Gulf of Mexico with 2,000 meters entering production? Tell me, you are OPEC, or you don't know, you tell me. Okay, 2 years, 1 year and a half. Then, what you have to do, Total is very difficult. There is no production systems yet to get so much. But wells like Galp, easy. You need money, yes. You need money. What is the best business in the world? It's an private oil company with a good administration. What is the second? A private oil company with bad administration. What's the third best? A government company with good administration. What's the fourth? A government company with bad administration. What's the fifth? A bullet factory. Then what you have to do? What you have to do? We have to press. You did the right answer. This country cannot wait 10, 12 years, my brother. We cannot wait. We have to put it there. If you do not produce in 6, take it back and give it to Marshall Mello because he'll produce. Am I wrong?
Now, this is all great. They've said a lot of things, but we haven't given the audience an opportunity to ask questions. And we have 11 minutes, and I know there are many questions in the room. And if there's a microphone that could be passed around, that would be greatly appreciated, because we've got a hand right in front that's ready to ask a question.
Microphone here.
We would not be doing it justice to the panel if you didn't have an opportunity to ask questions to this esteemed group of people.
Very good. They are the boss. They are the boss.
We'll get to you really quickly. First of all, I just want to thank everyone here because I've seen one topic throughout this entire conference, and that's been local. And local content requires training. And there's a few folks up here who are very committed to making sure that we bring training into the country so that we have the local content, or we have the local people. Now, I also wanted to challenge you all, and also everyone here, because one of the things I do in my vast amounts of spare time is find computers where I come from in the US that won't sell, but will be perfect to give the kids and secondary schools basic computer skills, basic computer training. And there's a trick here. I talk to the owners of the companies, and I say, if these won't sell, give them to me. I'll give them to a charity, and you'll get $100. You can claim $100 or $200 off your yearly taxes. And then I put them in my backpack, and I fly out here, and I give them away to the schools. Now, I'm just one guy. What can we do to go back to our countries, pool our minds together, or even come over and, if you're still here on Friday, discuss how we get computers here?
Great. Thank you for that question.
Thank you so much.
Really
Let me
appreciate
pass
it.
this on.
You have to ask the questions.
All right. Great contribution. How do we all contribute to get computers here to improve the skill set? And I think that's a great challenge put out to all of us that we can think about.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my question is to Jay Park. First, let me totally say I align with Dr. Sindila. All that you have said, very apt. I'm very much with you. The question to Park is that why is it that when you, I remember in August, if I remember very well, yeah, I don't know if you spoke then, but in August last year, what you present is Dutch disease. And I think you talked about it. Luckily, Dutch is in Europe, not in Africa, and we thank God for that. Why is it that the Dutch disease is only prevalent in African countries and some developing countries? There is no Dutch disease in Qatar. Maybe they didn't allow the Dutch to come in. There is no Dutch disease in Abu Dhabi. There is no Dutch disease in Saudi Arabia. Neither did the Dutch get to Brazil. Don't you think something is being done wrong to Africa by these international oil companies who just want to exploit, take out, and don't add value in the country? And that is the origin of the Dutch disease and we must find a vaccine to cure that Dutch disease in Africa. Thank you.
Okay, and so we'll give Professor Parker an opportunity to answer that one, and then we'll get into the next question.
Sure. Thank you for that question. And the question you put, books have been written about the resource curse and how to deal with it and so on and so forth. And let me define the Dutch disease for you. The Dutch disease is a term coined by The Economist magazine when they observed what happened to the Dutch economy, a full manufacturing economy, when all of a sudden North Sea oil revenue started flowing into the country. The Dutch currency went way up in value, and all of the Dutch manufacturers were no longer competitive. And the consequence of that was they lost their markets, and they became a state where they were mostly focused on the oil and gas revenues from the North Sea. So it's kind of, it's nothing uniquely Dutch about it. It's just that when all of a sudden a whole bunch of money comes into the state related to oil and gas and makes your currency more valuable, the things that you were otherwise doing might not be worth commercial any longer. Okay? And so we've seen the Dutch disease happen in many jurisdictions. I've seen it happen in Canada, okay, as well. So every place is vulnerable to that. Can we fix the Dutch disease? Well, it's kind of an economic effect, but many jurisdictions and your petroleum regime can work to try and do that. One of the things people are trying to do is a sovereign wealth fund, to take some of that money that would otherwise make the economy really hot and put that into a savings account, in effect, and therefore keep the economy cooler than it would be if all this money was flying around within the state. There's a number of other features as well. I look on the resource curse as 8 different things, 5 of which a good petroleum regime can address. And I think I'm going to leave that for all I would say on this subject at this time, but it's a great question.
I want to pick him up and give you our answer. This will not happen in Namibia. Never. We don't need a vaccine. Namibian people are different. Look at the eyes of the guys here, the waiters. And I'm giving my talk here, and everybody will go down. Don't say that. You have a young generation with hunger. You speak 3 languages. Which country in the world speaks 3 languages? Since you are a baby, none. You cannot allow this happen. And only depends on whom. You and government policy. Education, 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 education. This guy make that question because he brings 50 to 6 computers every year and distribute. This is why I make this question. We have to believe. We have to jump. You have a fantastic leadership. Which country has a Sanayoma, a Pohamba, and a Hagi? And now I am very excited that came a lady, because guys needed to be substitute. Then this will not happen. I guarantee to you. You are inquiet people. We must be hungry together.
Great. And not to lose track of the point that was made earlier. And one of the things that I'd like to encourage is there anyone from Wogan in the room? So there's someone from Wogan here, and I think if you connect, there's a structure that already exists to support
look at the lady.
education, and entry into the sector.
Look at there. Look at the lady there.
Yeah, Wogan. Okay, so the mic.
Yeah, my name is Ambrosius Ipinge. Maybe my question is a little bit different. Maybe you can help me, the professors and the doctors here in front. And thank you very much for all this, your presentation. I really appreciate it. I wanted to know and understand this oil commodity. Who owns it? Is it government? Or is it the companies that are doing exploration?
The government, the country, not the government, the country.
So perfect question. We've got a company that's producing a commodity on stage.
Yeah.
No,
So-
but who owns the oil? Is the country.
Who owns it?
But let the man who's in a company that produces a commodity answer you that question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You talking about me?
That's right.
So, I mean, I don't see it much different from other from minerals like diamonds or uranium. So essentially, it belongs to the country. The country then licenses operators who are willing to invest in bringing out those minerals. And those minerals should then essentially benefit the country. And then sometimes we should, we should maybe not look too much in the shareholding side, because as a shareholder, you need to put capital in. And we need to look at the ancillary stuff that is around that. Because what government will get out of this are royalties, taxes, and with that, we can then, instead of, we can then use that to build other industries, whether it's agriculture, whether it's tourism, etc. So essentially, the minerals belong to the country. It's an operator takes it out, country gets its share through taxes, royalties, etc. Sometimes the country can have a share in the business, as in my case. I mean, we're a 50-50 joint venture where the government owns 50%. Government also gets a share of the dividends. Government gets share of the social spend, whether we are upgrading communities or hospitals or schools. That's essentially helping government to do all sorts of things. But I think we should not just look at the shareholding, we should look at the whole industry in itself and what are the benefits and how much of those benefits are actually staying behind in the country or accruing to the citizens.
Right. Sindila, is there anything, as someone who's looked at the, full social impact studies, that you'd like to add on that point?
I think Vili has done a very good justice to that particular question, but just to summarize it, is that the Constitution of Namibia is very clear. Subsurface resources, all the resources belong to the state. And in order to regulate those resources, whether it's solid state resources, in this case the minerals, that are solid, your copper, your uranium, whatever you might call it, lead, zinc, they are governed under the Minerals Act, which is directly linked to the Constitution. It allows the Minister of Mines to give a license for exploration, license for mining, and license for do reconnaissance work. But the ownership still belongs to us. It's the state resources. And now to summarize that in terms of the environmental or social aspect that's associated with the mining and petroleum resources, yes, there are some environmental issues, but these environmental issues are in positive and negative one. And in most cases, when you do an environmental social impact assessment, you want to identify which of these positive impacts are there and prepare mitigation measures that enhances the positive impact and minimizes the negative impact. And the overall document that comes from that study is what we call an environmental management plan. And that's a document that an operator takes and implements, and then the government monitors that. That is governed under the under the Environmental Management Act of 2007 and the regulation of 2012. And that cuts across the sector. That means it cuts under mining and it cuts under the petroleum. However, having got that environmental permit, which we call an environmental clearance certificate, it does not give a mining company, for example, a go-ahead and start the operations, because there are other permits that also still kicks in. If you are working onshore, the Water Act is one of them. You need to get water permit to be able to drill a freshwater borehole, to be able to discharge wastewater. And if you are working offshore, and for example, for Deb Marine Namibia, they would still need other permits such as radiation sources. They are using special sources that they use to detect, for example, sorting diamonds. They are regulated under a separate piece of law. So there are different sets of regulation that comes into play. For the oil industry, it's even more. You have up to 9 different permits that an oil company need to get before you can do any drilling, especially. And the difficult that we find in Namibia is that most of these permits are actually fragmented, so they are not coming under one house. They are coming in different packages, so you really need to know exactly what type of permit the company needs. So after getting your environmental permit, you may still need to make sure that the vessel that's coming in country to do the job need to have a permit, which is a pollution safety certificate that's managed under Maritime Affairs, a different ministry altogether from Ministry of Environment and Tourism. The Ministry of Fisheries has its own requirement where you need to get a pre-approval for the use of dispersant, which is some of the tools that you need to prepare as part of the emergency response plan and OSP contingency plan. That also must be approved by the Ministry of Mines and Maritime Affairs. The Minister of Mines and, in this case, the Petroleum Commissioner need to grant you the drilling permit. That is run separately, so you can see how difficult it is. It can take up to 9 months or even a year to get all these permits in place. And that's why it's such a challenging industry. Having said that, in summary, let me finish up.
Yep.
The oil industry in Namibia is a great opportunity if it's going to be commercialized. That means it's going to be coexist with the mining industry. It's going to definitely complement the mining industry. And overall, looking at how far we are from the coastal area, where the sensitive coastal resources are,
yep,
we don't have any issue. And based on some of the studies that we have done since for the last 20 years from the Namib, the Wildfish, the Luderes and Orange Basin, even if you have got one of the major spills taking place in Namibia, definitely that oil spill leak is likely to go in the northwest direction. You have 24 hours in order to respond. Most of the oil companies are fully equipped with emergency response, and I think the commercialization of oil and gas industry in Namibia will definitely complement the mining industry in that emergency response, for example, for dead marine can be complemented as well as any other port operations that are within the sensitive area. Another aspect that the oil that we have at the moment is a light oil. So even if you have got a major accident taking place, it's likely that it might definitely evaporate on its own before you can actually intervene with any dispersant. And then finally, the technology that is applied in the oil industry is of the highest standard, and with fully redundant system in terms of safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sindela. And Sindela, I'll take those as your closing remarks as well, and I'll give everyone in the panel 30 seconds to make closing remarks in the following order. I'll go Jay, and then I'll go Willie, and then we'll let Marco
Can you see?
bring it home for us.
This is not fair.
I thank you. I kind of felt like I did my closing remarks at the end of my comment, so I'm going to yield over my 30 seconds to Dr. Marcio, and I'm going to ask him this. You're from Brazil. You can bring technology transfer to Namibia. Brazil has 5 World Cups. Could you bring some of that technology to Namibia too, please?
Yeah. So
Come on, everybody. Look, mission given, mission will be accomplished.
Great. But you're not speaking yet, so...
No, I just say.
Good that you're going to touch on that point again. Willie, bring it home for your 30 seconds before we give it over to Marcio.
Thank you. I think for me, it's diversifying our economy. Let's not just, put all our eggs in one basket, into the oil basket. Let's continue with the mining. Let's continue with tourism. Let's continue with agriculture. Secondly, this is a time for us to foster partnerships with the oil companies that are coming in, whether it's around the areas of logistics, areas of training, looking at partnership collaborations with financial educational institutions so that we can train Namibians and increase that pool where all of us can draw from. Thank you very much.
Look, how unlucky is Jay. I proposed for Nancor, Veronica, and already integrate. I'm going to bring a center of excellence for Namibia. I will take 500 Namibia to training. I already put the plans. Because I created the first center of excellence in Brazil. I know how to do, and I'm going to do here. Not me, you. I will help. I'm not to do anything. I help. Who has to do is Namibians. Okay? Do you know what is the best quality of a person? Perseverance. Persevere. You don't need
to born bright, persevere, and you'll be bright. Example, Veronica, Maggie, Selma. You don't find these guys anywhere. They train with me in Brazil, correct? Where they are now, in my labs with me. They could find me anytime, because we have to believe. We have to have faith. All you can have is sleeping. No. It's like the church. Amen. Come on. Amen. Thank you.
Preach on. Preach on.
Preach.
That deserves an hallelujah and an amen.
I'm acting here as a clown because I love you, and to be 4 hours here. Stuff. And I apologize for my jumping, but everything that I told you is from my heart.
And there's nothing more that I can add after those great words. I trust that you have enjoyed the discussion on the panel. Thank you very much to everyone up here.
Well, what a panel, ladies and gentlemen. If anything, I think this just further underscores the commitment that we have, which we will hold each of you accountable to. So, gentlemen, very briefly, if you could gather for a quick picture opportunity. We do have our photographers on standby. Marcio, this is where I need you to say amen and take a picture.
No, but I want you here. Come on.
I still have to work here. Remember,
the protocol.
Breaking
Now
protocol.
You have to break the protocol. I don't believe in protocol.
So
look, this woman is an example. I told her 3 days ago, I never saw a person like her. Only my wife.
On that note, what we are going to do is, of course, keep each of you accountable to the commitments that have been made. Of course, one thing that has been highlighted is partnerships, ongoing development, and most importantly, the prosperity that we do want to witness within a nation like Namibia. As the team behind us is still moving around the furniture, of course, we ask that you take that picture opportunity, but we will be coming back to count those jobs. We will be coming back to follow through on those commitments to make sure that it's vibrant and, of course, remains committed to the Namibian economy. Ladies and gentlemen, we will build up a lot further on many of these themes that have been shared here today. And one thing's for certain is that as we look to expand on this, in a moment we are aware that many of you have been engaging in conversation to ensure that you actually build up on these themes. Deals have been made in the background, ongoing new networks have been forged and developed. Marcio will take that picture after I'm done working. But on that note, it does speak to the conversations that have been happening in the background and the commitments that have been made, and most importantly, following through with them. In our next segment, we will be actively participating to witness just exactly how these conversations have been taking place and how these deals have been built about. Understanding how it is that we capture the ongoing explorative opportunities across the continent and most importantly on the Orange Basin, and make sure that we do have the right partners on board in order to assist with the processing, the building up of the full value chain. We have 2 more segments to go and then we'll have our closing remarks, but I do want us to build some sense of encouragement around a new partnership that has been forged by 2 critical companies. Many of us are very familiar with Rhino Resources, a Namibian-based company that in itself has been very active within the Orange Basin and looks to continue with much of this opportunity and activity. They've also sought and solicited the partnership of Halliburton, as we know, a global entity headquartered in Houston that in itself also offers support to many of its peers within the oil and energy space. I'm going to call on representatives of both these companies now to expand a lot further on the partnership that they have, and most importantly, help us understand how this provides a footprint for ongoing growth and development across Namibia and the continent. Please warmly welcome to the front of the stage to participate in not only just a signing, but also share some perspective as to what this particular agreement does entail, how it does provide a benefit to the Namibian economy. Our 4 speakers who are joining us on stage, Mr. Jean-Marc Lopez from Halliburton, followed by Antoine Beryl, who also is from Halliburton, followed by Travis Smithard and Maria Mbundi, both from Rhino Resources, to give us some perspective on this deal and participate in a signing that we will witness, showing that active progress is being made here at the Namibia International Energy Conference. It's over to you. Please warmly welcome them with a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon. Let me introduce myself first. I'm Jean-Marc Lopez, and the Senior Vice President for Europe, Sub-Saharan Africa, and very proud to be here and represent Halliburton today. I'd like to introduce Antoine Berel, which is our Vice President for Angola and Namibia. First of all, I really like to thank you, the people that have organized this conference. I've been here for 3 days, quite impressed about the quality of the presentation, the quality of the people and the discussion we had so far. I like also to thank Travis for making the trip and to be here with us today. I know he has a quite busy agenda. Today, we celebrate the contract signing between Halliburton and Rhino Resources, marking the start of a new strategic alliance. And we will be working together on a very promising block in the Orange Basin. Our shared vision between the two companies make this collaboration so important in the current really competitive environment that we are facing today. The collaboration between the two companies will be fueled with more than 10 years regional experience from Rhino Resources and more than 100 years experience from Halliburton globally as a service company for the oil and gas industry. Our value proposition is quite simple and quite regular. We're going to collaborate, engineer solutions to maximize the asset value of Rhino. And we're going to create a legacy for the Namibian people. But let me tell you something. I have been really impressed for the past 6 months on Travis' leadership and his team at Rhino for really the dedication to the growth of the oil and gas industry in Namibia. Today, we start a new journey. And we're going to write our story. The story based on growth, but also the story about caring. Caring, Travis, about our alliance. Caring about doing business the right way. And by that, I mean by that, with ethical behavior. Caring about people, caring about the environment, and let me tell you something, which is probably the most important. Caring about making Namibia a better place to live. Thank you. Antoine?
So thank you, Jean-Marc. So first of all, I would like to thank Reach Africa Consulting under the patronage of his Ministry of Mine and Energy to organize those events, because those events are very impactful and really allow us, Halliburton and Rhino, to connect last year on the beginning, starting of the journey discussions with this deal signing. Secondly, an important part of this deal was the in-country value creation plan that we can demonstrate to Rhino. But it was not only about presenting a plan, but they was able to demonstrate that we were executing on this plan fast, so we can support all the services from this country by this summer. So thank you, Travis, thank you, Maria, as well, to put in-country value creations as the forefront of the foundation of this collaboration.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying for the graveyard shift. I know it's a tough one. I have the absolute pleasure of leading Rhino Resources as our Chief Executive Officer. And as the gents behind me have said, it's been quite a wild ride the last 6 months. We do have the privilege, though, of standing on the shoulders of Orange Basin giants, our friends Galp, the chaps at Total and Shell, for really paving the way and laying the foundation for what we believe is a really promising and potentially phenomenal story of success in Namibia. It is also our responsibility, as those who come after these giants, to take that baton of pioneering spirit and forge ahead. Never to sit in our laurels, never to just say this far and no further, but to continue to innovate, to continue to build value, and ultimately create what we believe is a successful scenario for the Namibian people. Our relationship with Halliburton, quite frankly, started over a very simple coffee. It was at a World Cup, actually. And I think it's really just testament to how Halliburton and Rhino both do business. We're both relationally based. We both believe in making sure that we are transparent in our business dealings and ultimately that we build trust. And I think those are the key parameters that really are the definitives for the Halliburton-Rhino alliance. I think our partnership also sends a definitive signal to the industry that Namibia itself is open for business, that Namibia encourages free market competition for the benefit of all stakeholders, not just a select few. So I think the Rhino-Halliburton shared ethos of, as Jean-Marc said, collaboration, local upliftment, and I think business relationships built on trust is really where we see the industry being propelled in the future. I think finally it is our distinct honor to be able to play a part in the success story that is Namibia. I'd like to thank the government of Namibia for really, quite frankly, backing what is a junior company in everybody's eyes. We believe we're a big company, but a junior company in a proposition where, quite frankly, we believe that we can add value. So allowing us the opportunity, allowing us the space to do what we believe we do best, which is get in early, make sure that we're driving the baton forward, and hopefully bring value creation with our own discoveries. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. As a Namibian woman who has been active in the oil and gas sector for over a decade now, one of the most significant contributions being one of the founding directors of Wogan, it is my distinct honor to be witnessing this signing ceremony. As the Deputy Country Manager of Rhino Resources Namibia, I can attest to the empowerment and encouragement that I directly receive from my principals and company directors in ensuring the representation of Namibian people. This partnership between Rhino and Halliburton should give us all, and by that I mean all Namibians, great encouragement, because not only is Halliburton the leading local content propeller in Namibia, but also because both companies have chosen to have this announcement done at a significant national platform such as the Namibia International Energy Conference. This is a testament to the ethos that both our companies share. Rhino has sponsored 3 students participating at the NIEC this year. I'd like to please ask them to stand. Ms. Jamila Jacobs, Ms. Alma Kluter, and Mr. Neville Indongo. They are in different fields, but that again is a testament to the growth and empowerment that we as Rhino are trying to achieve. And I'd especially like to thank my big boss, as I'd like to call him, affectionately call him that, for his dedication and his commitment to ensuring that we leave a great legacy and impact on the Namibian people, and to have them included in our operations moving forward. I thank you. Good luck.
Well, on that note, we all know that this is a very momentous occasion, and that does mean that it needs to be marked. And since you might have noticed, there is beautiful paperwork in front of us here with a table that we're hoping will be a moment in history that we'll all be able to acknowledge that this partnership between Rhino Resources together with Halliburton will be documented. So I guess plenty of photographers in the room. Many of you will be witnessing this key partnership and endeavor that, from what we understand, will officially kick off in the last quarter of this this year, the latter part of this year, and most importantly, continue to unlock opportunities, not only just here in Namibia, but of course seeking opportunities elsewhere, and prioritizing the growth and development of Namibians. So, fantastic to witness. You are literally creating history and drafting what the future does look like for Namibia's oil and exploration activities and how best it is that we partner as institutions. Ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause as well for this deal as we continue to see it being signed through. Now, I must tell you that we've witnessed many a conference, and this does actually underscore the reason and the purpose why we all gather here, to ensure that the conversations that you have either within the room, witnessing partnerships through the plenaries, or even if it happens outside, that the networking does actively translate into deals and commitments that we can witness. So, I'm aware that many of you have actively participated in similar moves. We might not have showcased them here today, but we want to let you know that we see you, we acknowledge you, and most importantly, we'll continue to celebrate the moves and partnerships that you forge. That next year we'll be able to actively participate with you too. On that note, let's make this picture slightly prettier. Gents, stomach in, chest out. Perhaps let's show the exchange of the documentation. See, this is what we do on television to make it look good. And exchange the contract between the two of you. Right. There we go. Shall we do that? There we go. It's a moment there. There we go, Mrs. Smithard. And as we know, we're all about documenting our history, right? And it's through these kind of images and partnerships that will stand the test of time in terms of history. Thank you so much for this partnership and, of course, ongoing development between Halliburton and Rhino Resources. Thank you so much. Truly appreciate it. Fantastic. Thank you so much. A round of applause as they make their way off stage, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. As mentioned, a few more moments to go before we do wrap up the conference. And I know many of you might be exhausted. It's been a long week, but most importantly, it has certainly been a very productive one. And that is what we want to maintain. We do ask that you do stay with us for just a few more moments longer, as we will be hearing the closing remarks from, of course, a woman that we all know by the name of Salma, who will officially close the program towards the end. But before we actually get there, I thought it best to call back my colleague on stage for us to quickly reflect on some of the progress, outcomes, partnerships, and announcements that might have been made within the media spaces, but of course, even here present in the room. So on that note, I do think what's been reflective for me has been the opportunity to make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that we do continue to build up on these partnerships, and primarily themes around the 4 Ps that might have been mentioned over the last 2 days.
Absolutely. We are truly at a pivotal point in Namibia's history, and under the first P, if we look at policy, government has clearly shared their commitment to continue with the momentum of policy that has already started, and is really looking to encourage both private sector participation. Then we also have some projects, which are moving forward with clarity on ongoing exploration and preparing for the other phases and support on the full development of the energy value chain. As the industry and projects develop, it's clear that innovative financing opportunities are necessary, and we saw that many, many different organizations are playing in this space. And we've actually been called to have a look at developing the domestic assets as far as possible.
100%.
And then we have our partnerships and people.
We certainly have seen quite a number of partnerships, and just as we've witnessed, Halliburton and Rhino Resources, certainly one that does stand out for the end of the conference. But we must also be aware that partnerships have been established amongst many of you as key corporate leaders. So much so that we've also seen evidence of the transactions that have been announced having a direct impact on community members. Specifically, I'm referring to an important deal that has been, ladies and gentlemen,
let's remember that we are live on NBC One and NBC Digital Plus.
Thank you kindly. Specifically referring to how best it is that these partnerships do benefit our people. We've seen this through the likes of Sintana, of course ensuring that they partner with local community members in essentially offering them an 8% equity stake within community trust to make sure that they benefit through the full value chain of the exploration process. That highlights the importance of people. that we're upskilling our people as Namibians. We're making sure that we use and skills exchange through the partnerships with people who happen to come from abroad. And what I do believe is quite critical is that once we get these 4 Ps right, policies, projects, partnerships, people, it takes us to the big P that we're all looking for, profit. Because once we have an economically viable and sustainable environment, businesses that are able to pay taxes, able to employ individuals, that is truly when we'll be able to see the true prosperity of the Namibian economy.
And just to add to the people element, let's remember the various institutions that shared all the developments that are happening in terms of skills development, so that within the country we have, to quote Mr. Willie Mertens, a bigger pool of resources. Yes, my friend, I listened. A bigger pool of resources from us to draw from. And I think it's absolutely imperative for us as a nation to own our own narrative.
100%, really important. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we truly are appreciative of many of you participating throughout the course of the program, your engagement, to our various speakers who have joined us on the panels, offering presentations, the engagements that have taken place offline throughout the cocktail strategic session, and of course the gala dinner that we had last night. We do want to remind you that even this evening there will be a follow-up session to allow for further networking before your official goodbyes do take place by the end of this week.
Yes, the farewell reception will start in the garden at 5 p.m. and we look forward to chatting further with you in that space.
100%.
But I think, Google, for you and I,
100%. I do understand we are just waiting for our final speaker to make their way up on stage, and we will get clarity on that in just a moment. But we also want to remind you, ladies and gentlemen, that given that this is the 6th edition of the Namibia International Energy Conference, we are continuing to build on the momentum that we forged over the last few years. So should you have feedback, suggestions, updates to the program, participation that you'd like to expand on, we invite you to continue sharing your feedback to make sure that the 7th, 8th, 9th, the 30th edition that will likely take place where some of us might not be around will still continue to be a success and fundamentally benefit the Namibian economy and its people. On that note, we'd like to continue with our next speaker. Offering us the closing remarks officially is the Deputy Minister within the Ministry of Energy, but more specifically mining, to give us concluding remarks on the
It's Maggie Shino, right? Sorry, Gugu. Maggie is our Petroleum Commissioner of yesterday morning, and she'll be closing for us initially. Please welcome her to the stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you much, Gugu, for calling me Deputy Minister, but I'm not the Deputy Minister. Yeah. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we're finally here in the last stretch of the day, and I'm just standing in whilst we are waiting for the Deputy Minister or the actual final closing remarks to be made. But I just wanted, as a Petroleum Commissioner, I didn't want the opportunity to pass by without necessarily saying a word of appreciation to the industry and to you all for what you have shown and what you have done for Namibia in terms of supporting us in this journey that we are in as a country at this stage of us developing a brand new industry, something that we have never done before in country. We appreciate you so much, and we have been overwhelmed with the support that we have received from all over the world. You all came to Namibia to witness what we are doing, but your presence here have also shown us and has been a testimony of us to say that perhaps Namibia as a country, we are doing something right. Perhaps as a country, we are on the right path of trajectory towards where we want to be, and that's the reason why the industry or the people want to be with Namibia, to be part of that significance that is coming. Ladies and gentlemen, for us as a country, the development in the oil and gas sector that we are working with, when we say that it's a game changer, we are not just saying it for the sense of the world. It's really an industry that we are looking, and that is giving us the last hope of economic emancipation. I think yesterday I informed you about the need for you to be aware of where we are coming from. As a nation, we are a very young nation, have only been independent for the past 34 years, and there is very heavy remnants of our past that we are trying to address. But the main remnant of that is economic inequalities that we are experiencing as a Namibian people. Even though we have our diverse culture and our diverse need, the economic difference and inequalities is what set us apart the most as a nation. So with this industry, we are holding on to it as a beacon of hope. As a beacon of hope for a brighter future, as a beacon of hope for a Namibian child to have a future that their parents could not have. For a Namibian child to grow up in such an environment where we do not see ourselves as lesser of a developing country than the developed world. We are seeing ourselves as being a nation that can enable us to offer the world an opportunity for them to say that, yes, even African countries can be able to do it. And therefore, you being here for these past few days, the engagements that we have been having are a journey or a step forward toward us realizing that hope for the Namibian child, for a brighter future, for an African country that has a difference. So with that, I want to, from the bottom of my heart and from the Ministry of Mines and Energy and from the Office of the Commissioner, and as a representative of the industry, just to communicate our appreciation and looking forward to collaborations that we have made, looking forward to us materializing all the decisions that we have made here. And hopefully, we have managed, through Reach Africa, we have managed to give you a platform that has allowed you to have conversation that will come out into tangible results that you will be able to carry forward. So it's just a few words of appreciation from the Office of the Commissioner that we appreciate your support to the industry. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, almost there. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for that introduction. And you're quite right. Perhaps I was just foreseeing what your future role within government might be in the next few years, right? So hopefully that could potentially lead us there. Well, we are going to hear from two more speakers who will be concluding this particular gathering for us. And again, please bear in mind that we are following through with the necessary protocols to ensure that we do hear from key industry stakeholders to share their final messaging with you. Of course, I've mentioned her name many a time throughout the course of the program, at the gala dinner, at the strategic functions, at the cocktail function, and of course, many of you have been speaking and engaging with her very actively throughout the course of this conference. Salma, who joins us as the CEO of Rich Africa Consulting, to give us a few words before introducing the final speaker for today's gathering.
Thank you, Gugu. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to keep it short and sweet before we call our Honorable Deputy Minister to close the conference. The sixth edition of the Namibia International Energy Conference has concluded after an enriching 72 hours. I'm so grateful to all of you, sponsors, speakers, media, participants alike, for your contribution and adding to the experience that has advanced the theme of Reimagine Resource-Rich Namibia, turning possibilities into prosperity. My key acknowledgement has to be extended to the Ministry of Mines and Energy, our patron, as well as our strategic partnership with the African Energy Chamber. The organizing committee, my team, thank you so much for your professionalism, dedication, and attention to every single detail. No task was too much to handle, and I'm truly grateful for all your efforts. I was asked before the conference started what I hoped delegates would take away from this conference, and we coined the phrase actionable strategies, as well as promoting Namibian content. As we leave here today, let us carry forward these actionable strategies shared, the connections we have made, the lessons learned, the inspiration we have gained, and let's make a tangible difference. Namibia needs us. The future leaders need us to start doing something today so that when we meet again in 2025, our stories will be richer and dreams closer to becoming a reality. To all our international guests, we hope that you have the opportunity to stay an extra day or so and to enjoy the culture and scenery that Namibia has to offer. Minister Alwendo did make you promise to stay a little longer. Thank you once again for making the Namibia International Energy Conference a must-attend event in your calendar. I would like to thank Chevron, Shell, and RMB and all the sponsors for believing in this initiative. And I want to wish you all safe travels until we meet again in 2025 for a bigger and better NIEC. And I'm also happy to announce the dates for next year. The 7th edition will be hosted on the 22nd to the 24th. Yeah, 22nd, 23rd, 24th of April, 2025. And I look forward to seeing you all there once again. And I hope you had an amazing time. And now I would like to call on Afra, who will call on our Deputy Minister. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think Madame Selma Shimutwikeni deserves a much bigger round of applause. Huh? It actually gives me goosebumps. 12 years, consistent focus and dedication, and look at what she's offered us today. All this for her country, Namibia. Okuhepa, sisi. It is now my honor to call upon the Honorable Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Mines and Energy in the ministry's capacity as patron of this conference to deliver final closing remarks. Please welcome to the stage Honorable Cornelia Shilunga. Thank you.
Madam Dapuilapo Selma Shimutwikeni, the Commissioner for Petroleum Affairs in the Ministry, Excellencies, Ambassadors, High Commissioners, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Good evening. Thank you. Madam Selma Shimutwikeni epitomizes the adage, women can do anything they set their minds to. Through her exemplary dedication to the Ministry of Mines and Energy, spanning not just the past 3 days, but an impressive 12-year journey of nurturing and expanding this conference year after year. She deserves an applause. Collaborating with Selma is not just a privilege, but a catalyst for showcasing Namibia's potential to the world and to prospective investors. Her achievements are not just personal triumphs, but contribute significantly to the nation's success as a whole. The impact of initiatives like the Future Energy Leaders, the Legacy Program, spearheaded by Selma, instills confidence in the youth and that they are being equipped to propel Namibia to unprecedented heights. These past 3 days have been a profound learning experience, thanks to the esteemed minds from around the globe who generously shared their insights and engaged with us, igniting discussions on how we can collectively chart our nation's course forward. Each interaction adds to our collective wisdom, propelling us further towards our goals. Observing numerous side meetings during the conference, I'm hopeful that participants heeded to the call of Honorable Minister Aroendo's Council to forge enduring partnership that foster mutual prosperity. Namibia stands as an open invitation to investors, as elucidated in detail during the plenary sessions. Now, it is that opportune moment to capitalize on these discussions and bring deals to fruition while the momentum is high. We stand on the cusp of an energy revolution, beckoning us to move beyond mere imagination and unite in action to transform not just Namibia, but the entire region and the continent. The time for Africa and Namibia to shine is now, ladies and gentlemen. And together, we can seize this historic moment and shape a brighter future for generations to come. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the success of this 6th Namibia International Energy Conference is a success for us all. Minister yesterday spoke about collaboration, working together, and bring about prosperity for our nation, for Africa, and for the globe. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, with that, I would like to declare this conference officially closed. And I thank you.
Please remain on stage, if you don't mind, sorry. We'd just like to arrange for a photo opportunity with the Petroleum Commissioner, as well as Selma. Thank you for coming to the stage.
No problem. Vanessa, if you could please move
And
to the center of the
Dr. Ben
stage.
Youssef from OPEC. So you can take your one and then... Thank you so much. Let's give them a round of applause. And lead them off the stage. Thank you so much.
Manage down the stairs.
My dear Gugu, first time in Namibia?
First time in Namibia.
2
Can you
days.
believe it? I am actually disappointed in myself as a South African because I literally stay a hop, skip, and a jump away. But more than anything...
But you learn fast, huh?
I do.
Because you speak some language, no?
I understand so. Now that you put me on the spot, it's just gone out of my mind. But on that note, though, I certainly will be back. It's been a very pleasurable experience, and if I understand and recall correctly, there are many languages and cultures to immerse myself in, but I
Yes.
understand that perhaps one phrase and statement that I learned earlier this week, da pandula unene.
Hey, there she goes.
There we go.
And then in my mother's mother tongue, Kei Eos. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Gugu, Fupi,
Yes,
I got it right?
ma'am. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, a very familiar face to many of you as Namibians, Miss Afra Shimming. Chase, who joins us as well as my co-host and presenter.
That's awesome.
It's been
Thank
a
you.
busy week. It's been a fruitful week. It's been an exhausting week for many of you here today, but we really appreciate your time. We wish you well, safe travels. This officially concludes.
It officially concludes these proceedings. Outside, we continue to have some fun, enjoy some music with a farewell reception, which will be moderated by the beautiful Mojo, which is the only way I remember her. Give yourselves a round of applause. We've come to the end. Thank you so very much. And see you next year.